The spotlight froze. 10,000 voices fell silent. Elvis Presley's microphone hit the stage floor with a metallic thud that echoed through the arena like a gunshot. The music stopped. The band froze mid-note. Security guards looked at each other in confusion. And then Elvis did something no one expected. He stepped down from the stage, walked past the front row, and disappeared into a dark corner where no camera could follow. The audience didn't know whether to applaud, to worry, or to leave. But in that corner, something was happening that would change everything anyone thought they knew about the king of rock and roll. This is the story of the night Elvis Presley broke every rule of show business. And the reason why will leave you speechless. It was August 1974. The Las Vegas Hilton International Hotel was packed to capacity. Elvis Presley was at the peak of his comeback era, performing 2 shows a night to sold-out crowds. The glittering jumpsuits, the iconic voice, the magnetic stage presence, everything was there. But behind the spectacle, behind the legend, there was a man carrying a weight that no spotlight could illuminate. That night started like any other. Elvis arrived backstage 3 hours before showtime. His entourage, the Memphis Mafia, surrounded him as always. Jokes were told, coffee was poured, and the pre-show ritual began. But his longtime friend and bodyguard, Red West, noticed something different. Elvis was quieter than usual. His eyes kept drifting toward the door, as if he was waiting for something or someone. The opening act finished. The lights dimmed. The audience roared as Elvis walked onto the stage in his white jumpsuit adorned with golden eagles. The first chords of CC Rider filled the arena. The crowd was on their feet. Everything was perfect. Everything was going according to plan. Until it wasn't. About 20 minutes into the show, during a slower ballad, Elvis paused between verses. He scanned the audience, something he did often. But this time, his gaze stopped. Fixed. Locked onto something in the far corner of the arena, away from the main lights, in a section that was barely visible from the stage. Then Elvis Presley did something that made every musician on stage hold their breath. He stopped singing mid-verse. The band continued for 2 more bars before realizing their lead had gone silent. The arena fell into a confusion that felt almost sacred. 10,000 people waited. Watched. Wondered. Elvis handed his guitar to a stagehand without a word, walked to the edge of the stage, and did the unthinkable. He stepped down into the audience. Security rushed forward, but Elvis raised his hand, a gesture that meant, "Stay back." The crowd parted like water as he moved through them, not toward the front rows where the VIPs and celebrities sat, but toward the back, toward the shadows, toward that corner where the light barely reached. And that's when people started to see what Elvis had seen. There was a young boy. Maybe 9 or 10 years old. He was sitting alone in a wheelchair, positioned in an accessible area far from the main crowd. His head was bowed. His mother stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. The boy was crying. Not the happy tears of a fan meeting their idol. These were different. Deeper. The kind of tears that come from a place beyond words. Elvis knelt down in front of the wheelchair. The arena was so silent now that people in the back rows were leaning forward, straining to see, to understand what was happening. No one had ever seen anything like this. Performers don't stop shows. They don't abandon the stage. They don't break the fourth wall, the illusion, the contract between entertainer and audience. But Elvis wasn't performing anymore. He was just a man, kneeling in front of a child who needed him. Later, witnesses would recall fragments of what they saw. Elvis taking the boy's hand. The mother covering her mouth, overwhelmed. Elvis speaking softly, words no one else could hear. And then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 90 seconds, Elvis did something that no one could have predicted. He took off his iconic scarf, the white silk scarf with golden trim that he'd worn in countless performances, and placed it around the boy's neck. Then he leaned in close and whispered something in the child's ear. The boy looked up for the first time. His eyes met Elvis's. And he smiled. It was a smile that traveled through that arena like electricity. A smile that somehow made 10,000 strangers understand, without explanation, that they were witnessing something sacred. Elvis stood, patted the boy's shoulder, nodded to his mother, and walked back through the crowd. Security escorted him back to the stage. He picked up his guitar, adjusted the microphone, and without acknowledging what had just happened, without offering explanation or apology, he began to sing again. But the song he chose wasn't the one that had been interrupted. He started with, "How Great Thou Art," a gospel hymn that he rarely performed in Vegas. His voice was different now. Rawer. More vulnerable. The showman was gone. What remained was something more honest. Subscribe now, because what happens next is something you won't believe, and you need to hear how this moment changed everything. The audience didn't know how to react at first. Some cried. Some stood in reverent silence. Some began to sing along, softly at first, then louder, until the entire arena was filled with voices joining Elvis's. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was a moment of collective humanity. A reminder that beneath the glitter and the fame and the spectacle, there was connection. There was empathy. There was love. Backstage after the show, Elvis's manager Colonel Tom Parker was furious. "You can't do that," he shouted. "You can't stop a show like that. You scared the audience. You could have caused a panic. You broke protocol." Elvis looked at him with an expression that no one in the room had seen before. Calm. Immovable. "I don't care about protocol," he said quietly. "That boy needed something, and I had it to give. That's all that matters." The story could have ended there. But it didn't. Because what Elvis didn't know, what he couldn't have known in that moment, was the full story of the boy in the wheelchair. His name was Michael. He was 10 years old. And he was dying. Michael had been diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer 8 months earlier. The doctors had given him less than a year to live. His mother, a single parent who worked 2 jobs, had saved every penny she could to bring him to Las Vegas for one wish: to see Elvis Presley perform live. But here's the part of the story that breaks your heart and rebuilds it at the same time. Michael hadn't been crying because he was sad. He was crying because he was overwhelmed with gratitude. 3 days before the concert, Michael's pain had become so severe that doctors told his mother he might not be strong enough to make the trip. But Michael refused to give up. He told his mother, "If I can just see Elvis once, just once, I can handle anything." And when Elvis stopped the show, when he walked through that crowd, when he knelt down and looked Michael in the eyes, it wasn't just a celebrity meeting a fan. It was one human being acknowledging the courage of another. It was Elvis seeing not a sick child, but a warrior. A fighter. Someone who had traveled through unimaginable pain just to be in that room. The scarf that Elvis gave Michael became his most treasured possession. He wore it every day. In hospital beds. During chemotherapy treatments. In the moments when the pain was so overwhelming that words couldn't reach him, he would hold that scarf and remember the night the king of rock and roll stopped his show for him. Michael lived for 7 more months. Longer than doctors had predicted. His mother later said in an interview that she believed those extra months were a gift from that night. "Michael found a strength I didn't know existed," she said. "Elvis gave him something to hold on to. Hope. Proof that he mattered. That someone saw him." When Michael passed away, he was buried with that scarf. His mother kept only one photograph from the funeral, a Polaroid someone had taken of Michael in his wheelchair that night at the concert, Elvis kneeling beside him, the scarf draped around his shoulders. She framed it. And above the frame, she placed a small brass plaque with an inscription. "The night the king stopped for my son." Elvis never spoke publicly about that night. He didn't need to. Those who were there carried the story. They told their children. Their grandchildren. They wrote letters to newspapers. They called radio shows. The legend grew not because of Elvis's fame, but because of his humanity. Years later, after Elvis's death in 1977, Red West was asked about that night in an interview. "People always want to know about the wild stories," Red said. The cars, the parties, the excess. But that night in Vegas, that was Elvis. That was who he really was when the cameras weren't looking. He saw pain, and he couldn't walk past it. He had to stop. He had to help. It cost him nothing and everything at the same time. What Red meant was this: Elvis could have kept singing. He could have finished the show according to schedule, met with Michael backstage afterward, taken a photo, signed an autograph. That would have been enough. That would have been more than most would do. But Elvis didn't do what was enough. He did what was necessary. He stopped the world for one child. He broke the rules of entertainment, of spectacle, of business. He chose humanity over showmanship. And in that choice, he revealed the truth that all legends are built upon: greatness isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you give to others when no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain, when the only reward is knowing you made someone's impossible moment a little more bearable. The white scarf with golden trim became more than a souvenir. It became a symbol. Proof that empathy isn't weakness. That stopping to acknowledge someone's pain doesn't diminish you, it defines you. In the decades since that night, hundreds of people have come forward with similar stories. Moments when Elvis stopped what he was doing to help someone in need. A waitress he tipped with a new car when he overheard her worrying about her broken transmission. A stranger's medical bills he paid when he saw a family crying in a hospital waiting room. A young musician he mentored who was about to give up on his dreams. These stories weren't publicized during his lifetime. Elvis didn't keep a PR team documenting his good deeds. He didn't tweet about charity. He didn't post inspirational messages with carefully curated photos. He just lived. He just helped. He just stopped when stopping mattered. And that's why the story of Michael and the white scarf endures. Not because it was extraordinary in Elvis's life, he did things like this all the time, but because it represents the best of what we can be. A reminder that we all have the power to stop our own shows, to step off our own stages, to walk through our own crowds towards someone who needs us. Share this story if it moved you. Subscribe to keep these moments of humanity alive. And remember that sometimes the greatest performances happen when the music stops. The legacy of that night lives on in an unexpected way. Michael's mother donated the photograph and a handwritten letter describing the encounter to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's displayed in a small exhibit titled, "When Legends Listen." Visitors often stop there longer than anywhere else in the museum. They read Michael's mother's words. They look at the photograph. And they leave changed. Because they realize that the measure of a man isn't found in the records he breaks or the stages he commands. It's found in the moments when he chooses compassion over convenience. When he sees suffering and refuses to look away. When he understands that his presence, his acknowledgement, his willingness to stop, can be the difference between despair and hope. Elvis Presley died 3 years after that night in Las Vegas. But the boy he stopped for, the scarf he gave away, the silence he chose over spectacle, these things outlived him. They became part of a legacy that transcends music. A legacy of humanity. And somewhere, in a frame on a mantle, a photograph still exists. A boy in a wheelchair. A man kneeling beside him. A moment frozen in time. A reminder that the greatest gift we can give each other is the willingness to stop, to see, to care. That's the story of the night Elvis Presley stopped the music and walked off stage. The night he chose one child over 10,000 fans. The night he proved that true greatness isn't measured in applause, but in the quiet moments when you decide that one person's pain matters more than the whole world's expectations. Years after Elvis's death, a reporter asked Colonel Parker if he regretted not documenting that moment for publicity. Parker paused, then said something unexpected. "Some moments aren't meant to be sold. That night belonged to that boy. Elvis knew that. I didn't." The white scarf still rests in Michael's grave. But the lesson it carried lives on in every person who heard this story and chose to stop their own music for someone who needed them. The king didn't just perform that night. He listened. He stopped. He cared. And that's why, decades later, we still remember.